Good evening, esteemed guests, His Excellency, ministers, delegates, respected colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I warmly welcome you all on this side event of UNEA-6 on making nitrogen visible through sustainable development goals, which is hosted by Government of Pakistan in collaboration with SANH, INMS, INI, and CIWF and UF. In this session, we have divided it into two sessions. The first session will be having 7 statements of the presentations, and later on we will have about 15 to 20 minutes of discussions at question and answer sessions. And afterwards, we warmly welcome you at the reception. So, with permission of the chair, I will request Mr. Iftikharul Hassan Shah Gilani, the Additional Secretary, Ministry of Climate Change and Environmental Coordination, Government of Pakistan, to please for his opening remarks. Yeah, please. You may come to the podium, sir.
Well, thank you. His Excellency, Mr. Matsuzawa Yutaka, Vice Minister for Global Environmental Affairs, Government of Japan, His Excellency, Mr. Hassan Mohammed, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Climate Change, Environment and Energy, Maldives, Mr. Ibrar Ahmed Khan, our High Commissioner of Pakistan in Kenya, Mr. Leticia Carvalho, she's the head of Marine Freshwater Branch Unit, Professor Mark Sutton, Director of International Nitrogen Management System and South Asia Hub, Mr. David Cooper, Acting Executive Secretary, Convention on Biodiversity, Dr. Mihai Constantinescu, Co-Chair of UNEP Working Group on Nitrogen, Mr. Irini Pitsilidi, Global Head Compassion in World Farming, distinguished guests, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I'd like to thank you and welcome you to this event. And I would also like to thank all of the other participants who are online with us. Basically, the main idea for this event was to first of all, create some awareness on the issue of nitrogen and some networking, because we are planning to bring about a resolution on this. I'll tell you more details in my talk. The issue is that though nitrogen seems very invisible in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. So due to its invisibility, generally what we feel is that probably it doesn't have any significant role to play within the overall ecosystem and the environmental context over the globe. But that's not the case. You see, even if we see the composition of atmospheric mix of gases, the ratio of nitrogen is about 78%. That of oxygen is about 21%, and some other gases, they're much, much lower. Due to this abundance, we feel that probably there's no shortage of nitrogen, and we can use it as we like it. But as it happens, that generally, you see, science has been introducing things, science has been introducing technologies on the plea and under the understanding that probably this is the best way forward. But after using them for about years and years, suddenly one day it dawns upon us that we had missed many things, and there are problems in things. Here I would like to quote like a line from Shakespeare's one of the plays, and he rightly says that, but man, proud man, most ignorant of what he's most assured. So this has generally happened. It's a very long para in Shakespeare. I don't want to quote it all, but I think this was relevant in this context, so I mentioned it. So after the agricultural revolution, scientists and we were of the opinion that probably the use of nitrogen could enhance both food security and the abundance of crops. But later what we found out was that the excess of nitrogen proved to be poisonous, and in certain areas there was a downfall in production of agriculture crops. So, and in most of the cases, overuse of nitrogen in lands was rendered most of the land as not usable in many contexts. The problem here is that even you see the SDGs, there's a long list of goals that we require to achieve in terms of SDGs, but the main thing that is required from us is that we keep things sustainable. Even if one area of you see environment is unsustainable, then it affects the overall goals. So we just wanted to highlight this invisibility of nitrogen in its effects across the planetary boundaries. In my own country, I would like to give you an example, because my own country is an agricultural country. What we saw is that there was an eutrophication of water bodies and river systems. Though the impact of nitrogen over land was not that much, but in terms of the groundwater, it was quite huge, because in some of the southern parts of Pakistan, the children, there was too much nitrogen in groundwater, and children, when they were given that water, they caused that methanoglobomania, a certain disease caused by excess of nitrogen. So we do have some experts. I think we have Mark Sutton with us. He will be giving you the more deeper technicalities of what damage and what kind of impacts nitrogen can create in the long run. But I think it's high time that due to the overuse of not just in the area of nitrogen cycle, there are many other things that we need to do. The reason is because the usage is increasing day by day. And just because of one factor, that we now probably are about 8.1 million people on Earth, and we are adding annually 80 million annually. And you can just imagine that if you calculate the food security required for them and the other services, obviously, if you do not have a plan to sustainable use of these resources, it's going to be extremely toxic for the Earth. We were planning, Pakistan as a country was planning to submit a resolution in UNEA purporting that we may bring in a new convention in order to moderate the use of nitrogen. But due to some administrative reasons, we've not been able to. There was a change of government, in the process of change of government, so we were not able to submit that proposal in time. But we do plan to bring it in the future. So we found that this event will be a better place in order to sensitize our partners, sensitize other parties who probably may be not knowing much about it. So in the long run, we want them to be, you see, strengthening our hands in bringing this change. In this context, prior to our proposal, there were two resolutions in UNEA previously. One was UNEA-5/2. And there was another one which I don't remember this name, but it was by Sri Lanka and one of our other, you see, friendly countries from UNEA. So we'd like to thank them. Thank them that they brought a sort of sensitization on the issue, and we'd also like to thank SASIP who worked a lot in this regard. So I would like all of you to thank you, all of you. I especially want to give my appreciation to the Cooperation of Compassion and World Farming, who have been very substantial help in organizing this event. And I would also like to be thankful for our collaborators from INMS, SANH, INI, GPNM, and with special thanks to Government of Japan and Maldives. And I appreciate that all of you have come, taken out a lot of time out of your busy schedule. And I think this will involve many of other partners in chalking out a fruitful, meaningful way to deal with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galani, for opening remarks. Now I would request Ms. Leticia Carvalho, Head of Marine and Freshwater Branch at UN Environment Program. Please, for a few words, please come to the dais.
I must confess, a bit tricky just to come with high heels here. Sorry, I couldn't refrain myself to speak about this, but excellencies, esteemed delegates, distinguished guests, dear friends. First, I need to say that I am honored to extend our heartfelt appreciation to the government of Pakistan for its commendable leadership in advancing sustainable nitrogen management. I didn't have this on my radar, but I have the pleasure to meet an old friend, the High Commissioner Khan, that has been working with me, or we have been working together in many other fronts like Mercury in the past. And I'm very honored to be here and meeting you again as chief of the Pakistanese delegation. It's amazing the progress made, and is not only significant progress, but also reflects a collective commitment to addressing critical environmental challenges. We are particularly encouraged by the rapid strides in implementing 2 UNEA resolutions on nitrogen management. I will do a little digression here to be a bit provocative, because I must confess that we were expecting that this UNEA will be discussing a 3rd version of this resolution, but as it was explained by the High Commissioner, it was not possible this time. So we hope and we'll be ready to support Pakistan and others to present future resolutions that can help us to evolve this debate. The engagement of nearly 90 member states who have nominated focal points to the UNEP Working Group on Nitrogen Management is a testament to the global community's shared dedication. Through 5 organized meetings, the working group is now channeling its efforts towards the crucial task of developing national action plans on nitrogen management. I'm Brazilian, and in my country, I had the experience to know the value of the national action plans as the first status to leverage legislation and policy. And my dear friends, we are here in a conundrum. After 2 resolutions and a big investment of all of us in this work, we are ready to support countries to move with projects that deliver action on the ground and policies in our pipeline. However, finance is required. We urge member states in a position to do so to contribute financial support to facilitate this initiative. This is going to be critical in the journey ahead of us. In this journey, the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management continue to be a cornerstone, providing invaluable technical assistance to member states on nutrients management. The collaborative efforts undertaken through this partnership contribute significantly to the broader goal of sustainable environmental stewardship. And I just need to say that before coming here, I bounced by chance to meet and greet David Cooper from CBD, and we both immediately connected that the target 7 on nutrients under the GBF is what we need to do and deliver. As we gather at this side event, we anticipate that it will serve as a platform to further strengthen cooperation among member states. By raising awareness on nutrient management, we aim to align our efforts with the Sustainable Development Goals and the Kunming and Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, Target 7. It is through such collaboration that we can collectively strive to create a sustainable and resilient future for our planet. I really would like to thank you for your commitment. I have been a testimony of your dedication, and I hope these vital initiatives will fructify from now until next UNEA, delivering the continuation of this debate, but more than this, the real implementation at the country level of the policy action that is needed to control excess of nitrogen. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you, Ms. Leticia, for your wonderful words. It's really good that 90 focal points for nitrogen working group have already been added to this scope. This is really great. Thank you very much. Now I would request His Excellency Mr. Matsuyama Yutaka, Vice Minister for Global Environment Affairs, Government of Japan, and I'm really thankful for the Government of Japan that they invited this invitation, that they accepted this invitation just within 1 week, and we are very grateful for this kind action. Mr. Yutaka, please.
Thank you, distinguished participants. Good evening, colleagues. First of all, I'd like to appreciate the government of Pakistan for organizing this important event tonight. It is my great honor to be here to talk about the future perspectives of sustainable nitrogen management on behalf of Ministry of the Environment, Japan. Nitrogen is an essential nutrient for food production, and its excessive utilization has a significant impact on multiple environmental pollution, including eutrophication of lakes and coastal waters and pollution of groundwater. Nitrogen oxides are air pollutants, and nitrous oxide is one of the powerful greenhouse gases as well. Towards sustainable nitrogen management, it is important to grasp the holistic material flow of nitrogen and the balance of input and output, and then consider effective measures. Japan imports almost all of its raw materials for nitrogen fertilizers, as well as nitrogen compounds in various forms such as food products and animal feed. Much of the nitrogen produced and imported is not used effectively and is discharged into the water and the atmospheric environment. Currently, we are working on the improvement of nitrogen budgets and inventory, and based on these scientific basis, we would like to develop a circular and resource-efficient use system for nitrogen resources in my country. Then let me introduce the achievements and the challenges of sustainable nitrogen management in Japan. In the 1950s and 60s, heavy environmental pollution caused by pollution growth and rapid economic growth in Japan was a severe problem. Since then, Japan has been taking various end-of-pipe measures through the Air Pollution Control Act and the Water Pollution Control Act by setting standards for exhausted gas and such as nitrogen oxide, as well as wastewater standards for nitrate and nitrate nitrogen. As a result of these end-of-pipe measures, we achieved significant improvements in air and water environment. However, there are still some challenges remained. In some areas, the concentration of nitrate and nitrate nitrogen in groundwater and total nitrogen in lakes do not achieve environment standards yet. On the other hand, in recent years, the impact of nutrient shortage on fishery resources has become an issue in coastal waters. In addition, as a climate change mitigation measures, the use of ammonia as fuel in hard-to-abate sectors particularly is expected to increase in the coming future. It is necessary to reduce emissions of nitrogen air pollutants into the atmospheric environment, of course. Since the issues of nitrogen management vary from region to region, it is necessary to act according to circumstances of each region and country. Interministerial coordination and cooperation are inevitable for promoting nitrogen management nationally, domestically. Based on UNEA resolution on sustainable nitrogen management, we organized the relevant ministries meetings since last year in order to facilitate communication, information sharing, and discussion among relevant ministries towards the development of the National Action Plan for Sustainable Nitrogen Management. In addition, we also established the Scientific Advisory Committee on Sustainable Nitrogen Management. We think synergetic approaches to address the interlinked global crisis of biodiversity loss, climate change, and pollution are effective for nitrogen management. For example, using livestock waste for energy contributes to water quality improvement and decarbonization. Japan has submitted a resolution in order to promote synergies, and we will promote the synergetic approach on nitrogen management, synergetically achieving water and atmospheric environment improvement with carbon neutral, circular economy, and nature positive economy. Finally, towards the sustainable nitrogen management globally, international and regional cooperation is also significantly important. Japan has several regional programs such as sharing knowledge and experience and promoting capacity building through the Acid Deposition Monitoring Network in East Asia, ENET, and Water Environment Partnership in Asia, WEPA, and supporting introduction of technologies by the model projects. In particular, ENET has been monitoring wet and dry deposition, soil, vegetation, land, water, and catchment for many years, accumulating a lot of data on reactive nitrogen in East Asia. In order to take a reaction, it is very useful to make effective use of such existing regional organizations and programs. Japan will continue to work together with you all towards the sustainable nitrogen management. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Yutaka, for your commitment to sustainable development goals. Of course, regional and global cooperation is the key to sustainable development goals. Now, I would request Mr. Hassan Mohammed, Deputy Minister, Ministry of Climate Change, Environment and Energy, the Government of Maldives, and I'm very thankful that they have also accepted our invitation in a very short manner. Thank you, sir. Please.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues, good evening. I'm honored to be given this opportunity to talk about the profound impact of nitrogen on the marine environment, to talk about how, by enriching our lands, we are subjecting our oceans to impoverishment. In this opportunity, I would like to congratulate and commend the work done by my Pakistani colleagues on this matter and bringing it to light. For us, as a small island developing country, our culture, economy, and our very future are inextricably linked with the protection of our marine environment. As you may know, Maldives is an archipelagic country which consists of approximately 1,190 coral islands, and 99% of our country is the ocean. So while we have undoubtedly made progress in this endeavor to address climate change and pollution, we have only begun tackling nitrogen back home recently. The urgency of the nitrogen challenge for Maldives is recognized internationally due in part to its location in the Bay of Bengal large marine ecosystem and its proximity to the Arabian Sea, both of which experience significant hypoxia and nutrient overloading. Our support and leadership for the two previous UNEA resolutions on sustainable nitrogen management proved to be highly beneficial for Maldives. They helped kickstart nitrogen interventions in our country, partnering with international organizations such as GCRF, South Asia Nitrogen Hub. Through their efforts, we have launched the first ever national policy on nitrogen in the Maldives, and this report highlighted that coastal pollution is a priority for us. Now, with the support of these partners, Maldives is preparing to launch a project to address ocean hypoxia throughout the country and develop a national action plan on nitrogen. Despite these strides forward, nitrogen seemed to be a sidelined issue in most conversations about environmental protection, particularly on the international stage. This is even though nitrogen as a greenhouse gas is 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and as an ocean pollutant, the metric tons of nitrogen pollution per year comes close to that of plastics. Yet, compared to these other concerns, nitrogen often is left out of the spotlight. Nitrogen inputs into the global environment now exceed all natural nitrogen fixation in the ocean. Chronic nitrogen loading is also destabilizing our reefs and hindering their recovery. Ocean acidification is further exacerbated by low oxygen levels, which increase acidification by releasing additional carbon dioxide into the ocean. The so-called dead zones within the ocean caused by hypoxia have also increased to over 700 in the last half century. And this too is reported to be a conservative estimate. And also, I would like to highlight that this threat is synergized with other environmental issues such as climate change and overfishing. Ladies and gentlemen, the cost of this issue is not only environmental, it also comes with a stark financial price. The global cost of ocean hypoxia is estimated to be between 200 billion to 800 billion USD annually. While this paints a bleak picture of the current landscape, it also highlights an attractive incentive that can be leveraged for policy-level decisions. It is vital that we take these incentives to the global stage and push for a change. On behalf of Maldives, I would like to emphasize the need for updated future resolutions, as have been mentioned here, that can significantly aid in advancing the remarkable work that have been done in the previous two resolutions. As a small island developing state with its own set of challenges, the Maldives stands committed to continuing our support for the cause of nitrogen. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hassan Mohammed, the Deputy Minister for Climate and Environment, Government of Maldives. Now, I would like to invite Professor Mark Sutton, Director, International Nitrogen Management Systems, South Asia Nitrogen Hub from Center of Ecology and Hydrology. Professor Mark Sutton will deliver his lecture on emerging messages for international nitrogen assessment. Professor Mark Sutton, please.
It's there, is it? It's there. I just can't see it here, folks. So I believe you have the full screen adjacent to you, and hopefully also on the top table on this laptop, if you want to share it a bit, shuffle it along. So I'm tasked here with giving you something about the emerging messages from the International Nitrogen Assessment. It's not yet published, but we're on the way. We're working on it as we go. And as you can see, this work has been funded by a number of funders, including the Global Environment Facility, United Nations Environment Programme, but also UK Research and Innovation through its Global Challenge Research Fund. The work is, we are going to solve some technical issues here, but it will be fine. Okay. So funded by those, we're delivering through the International Nitrogen Management System, South Asia Hub and the International Nitrogen Initiative, and let's say received by UNEP again for its working group on nitrogen, the Global Partnership on Nutrient Management, and we're also part of the work plan of the UNECE's Air Pollution Convention. So why care about nitrogen when there's really 78% of nitrogen in the atmosphere? It would seem somewhat counterintuitive that it would be a problem. The point is that it's not only atmospheric dinitrogen, there's also these different forms like ammonia, nitric oxide, nitrates in water, and also nitrous oxide, the greenhouse gas. So they're in short supply, whereas dinitrogen, there's lots of it. And those extra forms are the pollution. So we say there's a nitrogen crisis at the moment, particularly in some countries, where reactive nitrogen formation is making pollution and having all sorts of impacts. We use the acronym WAGES, waters being increasingly polluted, air pollution worsening, the greenhouse gases driving dangerous climate change, ecosystems being lost with this nitrogen crisis, and soil health under increasing threat. And that actually is also about inequality. Some countries have got too much. Other countries are really challenging to get enough nitrogen. So the key drivers are also continuing to grow. A human population is growing. Consumption is increasing. Inequalities are increasing. All of those are worsening this nitrogen challenge. And we would say that nitrogen's actually at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals challenge. And I've taken these pictures from what I call nitrogen land. For those of you in Northern Ireland, sorry to pick on you, but you have such great photo opportunities. And actually, these are very sad. This on the left is Loch Ness. It's the largest freshwater lake in the United Kingdom. And you can see they have really serious algal blooms. You can see how thick that algae is. If your pet goes in, it may die from toxic pollution. And you can see the dead swans there, the green over them. But it's not just about the waters. On the right, on top right, I'm holding some sphagnum. Sphagnum is the stuff that makes peat bogs grow and store carbon. And yet the nitrogen from the atmosphere is killing off that biodiversity. You can see the dead and the alive there. But it's not just in the UK, it's a global phenomenon. And just to take a few pictures there, the farmers on the left are out in protest because of the nitrogen crisis in the Netherlands. They've clamped down more and more on the emissions. They've already reduced emissions by 50%. They're now going for another 50% reduction up to 2030, and it gets really tough once you put your measures in place already to go further. Come to South Asia. In the Indo-Gangetic Plain, we know this is a hot spot for air pollution. That air pollution is nitrogen in part, nitrogen oxides and ammonia reacting with the other to make a great soup. So we face major challenges, and that's what our international nitrogen assessment is all about. It's been a 20-year ambition from the International Nitrogen Initiative, that global network of scientists. It's contributing to the work of the International Nitrogen Management System, and it's also leading to various guidance documents and special reports. And if you have time to write that link down, you'll be able to get access to the reports which are already published. We've been funded since 2017 with support from the Global Environment Facility and others through the Towards INMS project. And the chapters are now being finalized, looking for publication early at the beginning of next year. So what kind of things will this look like? The first is to say it's a big book. You could say it's the IPCC for nitrogen, the equivalent. Same publisher, Cambridge University Press, 5 parts of the assessment, the global nitrogen challenge, defining the problem, going to the foundations and the tools of assessing the nitrogen cycle, global integrated assessment across the planet, but also going into world regions in part B. How is the situation different in different parts of the world regions? And then the way forward. What are we going to be doing about it? How to get there? Now, there's only a few minutes here, so I'm going to particularly focus on the A, C, and D as we go forward. And you're going to have to be very patient when you want to hear more about the regions and the methods to wait another day. So I want first to reflect on the process itself over time leading to changing narratives. And as honourable delegates have mentioned earlier, nitrogen is often not as visible as it might be. And why is that? And I think one of the points is that we often think about the pollutants individually. N2O, NOx, ammonia, nitrate, all separately, and sometimes we just call it water pollution and don't realize that water pollution has got nitrogen at the heart of it. That also means we're missing critical synergies that can mobilize action because each room of a policymaker's world or each group of scientists are doing their own thing. I think we've made great progress as a process to bring those together to move forward. The next stage is to be more positive and say, well, pollution is just a bit negative. Can we be more positive and say that improving nitrogen use efficiency is really a great way forward to accelerate action? And I think it is. But actually, as we found, it's quite hard to set shared goals with that. We did at one point do so and said, let's all move forward, relatively speaking, by 20%. But those at the highest baseline had to do more. Those on the lowest baseline had to do less. So it was a bit counterintuitive. The new narrative we're working with now is about reducing wasted nitrogen resources. We are not having a conversation about reducing nitrogen inputs. If we were to do that, people would come back and say, well, hang on, don't we need nitrogen to feed our population? And fair enough. But if we waste less of the resources, what we've got will go further. And of course, it means less pollution. It's also easier to setting equitable shared goals. If you have no waste, you need no action. The more waste, the more action is needed. Now, how to summarize serious ambition, and we framed it as a term halving nitrogen waste, by 2030. Bold action that's more or less technically feasible, as I'll show, that there's a nitrogen conversation. The point about waste is in the past, people have often thought that municipal solid waste or wastewater is waste. We will say, actually, those are resources to be recovered and reused. The true waste is that which is lost to the atmosphere and to the water and is gone by that point. So we mean adding up all those pollution losses, and we also mean adding up denitrification back to dinitrogen, because all the money and energy was put into making that, it's a waste of resources. And of course, 2030 to align with the Sustainable Development Goals, as in fact, David Cooper here encouraged us right at the outset of our conversation. A diagram there on the right, halve nitrogen waste. You can make a narrative about nitrogen with every one of the Sustainable Development Goals very easily. So we started this conversation about halve nitrogen waste in a little room in New York University in 2018. And then we brought it to the Our Oceans Conference in Bali in October of 2018. And I got 1 minute to announce that to the Our Ocean Conference. And in order to make it memorable, I wore a Scottish kilt, which I'm afraid you don't get today because they gave me too many minutes. But there might be indeed, there might be a photograph of me wearing my kilt. When you have 1 minute, you've got to be memorable. That halve nitrogen waste ambition was then adopted by 14 countries in the Colombo Declaration in launching the UN Global Campaign on Sustainable Nitrogen Management. And from there to the EU Farm to Fork strategy, we know that they used that and that helped them get that agreement. And the next step was the 5/2 resolution at the last UNEA, accelerate action to significantly reduce nitrogen waste by 2030 and beyond. They didn't agree with the half, but a halving has clearly come in with this new Convention on Biological Diversity, Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, reduce nitrogen pollution by 2030, including reducing excess nutrients lost to the environment by at least half. And indeed, as possibly David will point us out, there's also an even more ambitious goal linked to that to avoid adverse effects. I would say that from 2018 to now, that's pretty good progress. That's pretty fast progress in the mobilizing of these ideas. We benefited from CBD at the beginning. It's come back to CBD at the end. Of course, it's not yet the end of delivering that. And the question is, how are we really going to deliver? I'm going to show you now some numbers about the emissions. On the left, the top is ammonia, then NOx, nitrous oxide, and water losses. And this is from 1850 to 1970 to 2010. And I think on the top part of those left-hand bars is the emissions to the atmosphere. And the bottom part of those bars is where do those emissions go? What are the sinks? And I think it's pretty clear. You can see how massively those have been increasing over time. The water numbers are just for 1970 and 2010. So the problem of that pollution has been getting much, much worse. In many places, nitrogen use efficiency has been going down, the nitrogen waste going up. Now, we want to look forward as well as looking past, and this is a really complicated slide, and so don't get scared by it. But on the very far left, you should be able to see numbers 1 to 5 there, which are our scenarios we're looking. We're using the what's called representative concentration pathway approach of IPCC and the shared socioeconomic pathway approach. And as it goes from brown to green, those are more ambitious scenarios. It includes both climate futures, but also about low, middle, and high ambition nitrogen policies. Those are technical measures, and a couple more here. One is looking at a high bioenergy world, and the other is looking at a really ambitious best case plus, where there's also looking at reducing excess dietary consumption, particularly in the rich world, and better food loss waste reduction. So what happens when you put all those together? There's a lot of bars on that, and I don't think you need to get into the exact details. You can see lots of different terms. You can see lots of different models. And of course, the first thing is you get a different answer with a different model. That's why we're using more than one. The left-hand bar in each case is the number for 2010. And you can see that the highest bar shows that if we do nothing, the situation will be getting much worse by 2050 in this case. Can we get to halve nitrogen waste? You can see that it's only the most ambitious of those scenarios that's getting down to a more or less halving. And I'll show that on the next slide here. This is just the ammonia and the nitrogen oxides. Left is with the image model, right is the gains model. And the overall message is, yes, we can get to halve nitrogen waste by 2030. In some region, it's harder because of population increasing and dietary consumption patterns increasing. But yes, more or less possible, but a couple of caveats. The first is, can we really get there by 2030? If you think about the investment needed in wastewater in some sectors, it takes several years. It's really going to be tough to achieve that by 2030 and to mobilize societal change on consumption. This will not happen overnight. So we would say the measures are there, the possibilities are there, but it's going to be hard to achieve it. I want to just briefly show an example of spatial variation. When you see the book in the end, there'll be so many of these maps. You can get to see every indicator you fancy, I suspect. At the top is the particulate matter. The fine particulate matter we breathe in, and this is the difference between 2050 and 2010. So that's saying that if it's red, it's getting worse. If it's blue, it's getting better. On the left was what if we do little. On the right is what if we take action. And you can see actually one of the reasons that South Asia is particularly a challenging area for nitrogen is the nitrogen air pollution. We know the particulate matter is very high. Nitrogen plays a key part of that. And that's one reason we're working with South Asia. Bear in mind the ozone. This is not stratospheric ozone in this case. This is tropospheric ozone, the ozone in the air we breathe. And you can see there's a real big difference there, and the effectiveness of the nitrogen policies there would really bring down the ozone levels. Now, those are a few graphs. This is in a way a concept graph. It's a level 1 estimate of total nitrogen waste for the world. So if people want some easy estimates, this is the way to do it. We've put the input to the food system, the output of the food system, the difference, and we've combined that with the biggest atmospheric combustion source, which is a NOx. It's not a full indicator, but a nice simple one. Now, what you can see, the pathway there, if you can see the writing, is all the different intergovernmental agreements that have been there so far since the foundation in the Stockholm Conference of 1972, which established UNEP. And following all those meetings, the nitrogen waste went up substantially. Perhaps we could say that it would have been even higher had nothing happened. And I think that is true with nitrogen oxides. The nitrogen oxides show some areas have decreased, other areas increasing. But look at the scale of the bit to the right of where we're at right now, around 2024. If we should really change that curve to half by 2030, it looks really, really scary compared to what is achieved. Has it really been feasible? You could take a gentler course and say, well, let's get there by 2050. But either way, this means that serious action is really going to be needed. And we'd say, actually, it's not scary. This is opportunity for the circular economy. And I'm going to show that now, just picking out the agri-food system. And this is UK, Europe, and world. And the first column is the nitrogen waste valued as a commodity, i.e. the fertilizer price equivalent paid by farmers. So take UK, we would be wasting 3.6 billion pounds worth of nitrogen. The next column is what the governments are paying in the farm support. They're paying 3 billion. So effectively, as nitrogen, we're wasting more than the entire value of agricultural support payments. That's a real big motivator to do better. And as you can see, it's more or less the same with the European Union, and again, a massive number there with the world. So this is about opportunity to do better, to be more efficient and waste less resources. And that's where we start to have a conversation about nitro finance, accelerating finance for nitrogen management. I'm going to almost finish now and give you a few extra thoughts. The first is this is not just about transport and combustion as we know it in the past, but as part of decarbonization technologies, the world is wanting to move to a hydrogen economy. One way to do that is to put your hydrogen with a nitrogen. A nitrogen and 3 hydrogens is ammonia. So ammonia fuel. So imagine solar power to make ammonia fuel. And then ship it around the world as ammonia and burn it in a power station. And I know actually our colleagues in Japan are actually at the leading edge of this kind of investigations. And I'd say it's really exciting to imagine that. But at the same time, there's really challenges to make sure that it's not leaky, that we're not leaking ammonia and nitrogen oxides and nitrous oxide. And that must be a challenge for environmental scientists moving forward. There's also a possible threat or opportunity on prices. We hear discussions that the interfacing of fuel prices and fertilizer prices might pull up prices, i.e. ending up paying more for your fertilizers. If that's the case, governments subsidizing are going to be even more motivated to sustainable nitrogen management. So I'm going to finish with a few emerging messages from this. International nitrogen assessment is on the way. Nitrogen is a really big deal and needs to be much more visible in the Sustainable Development Goals. We need sustainable nitrogen management to deliver several things. Now, reduced waste of a valuable resource, which we're estimating, depending on market price, between $200 and $600 billion per year. Improve food security, improve climate resilience, improved environmental quality for health, soil, biodiversity, all of those. And going forward, the nitrogen problem is going to get worse unless action is taken. Population increase in consumption per person. And that means really urgent transformative action is needed. That nitro finance to invest, to recover is really going to be needed if we're going to get there. We also need a durable intergovernmental process. Now, I'm really happy about this nitrogen working group, which we're taking part in. It's a start, but a durable process moving forward is needed. And indeed, that was one of the conversations to be had in a future resolution going forward. And that means working together between member states, between UN conventions and programs, and of course, within countries across ministries. So A lot of working together is needed, but look at that level of ambition, the scale of the problem, the opportunity to contribute to all of those SDGs. There's really an opportunity for greater ambition if those 2030 goals are to be met. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark, for a wonderful talk. And after Mark, it's my turn. But I always feel difficult when Mark was discussing, Mark is discussing nitrogen, then there is nothing left to be discussed. And always it's helpful too, because he has set the agenda. And everyone knows what is nitrogen, why it's important, or why we are here. Thank you, Mark. So please I will be discussing on sustainable nitrogen management from the Pakistan's perspective, rather with a very brief on the region of the South Asia. Thank you. So it's clear that the reactive nitrogen is essential for the very existence of life on planet Earth. It's needed for the food security. And at the same time, excess and inefficient use of nitrogen and the emissions of nitrogen from the soil, land, and water. It results in deterioration of soil, air, and water quality. It decreases the biodiversity, or it causes the biodiversity loss and climate change, the triple, you can say, planetary crisis. So going to just, this is the global nitrogen budget for crop sector, because nitrogen is linked with all of the sectors, many sectors. I'm just giving the example from crop sector. We are adding annually about 161 teragram of nitrogen per year to our system, to cropping system. And we are getting or harvesting only about, this is 73. So what is rest? It is the surplus nitrogen which is available to be released to the environment. It may go to the groundwater, it may go to the marine system, and it may pollute the atmosphere. So you can see different graphs on the right side. There is a significant increase in the nitrogen input, and resultantly the surplus of nitrogen in the system has been increased tremendously, particularly onwards from 1961 in the South Asia region. And when it comes to South Asia has about 25% of the population of the globe. However, with only about 4.8% of the world's land mass. So we are already experiencing severe pressure on the ecosystem services. And we have observed significant increases in nitrogen inputs. And recently we estimated that during 2000 to 2015, the increase in ammonia emission was about 36%, and more than 100% increase in the NOx emissions, and 36% increase in nitrous oxide. So this is alarming that within only 15 years, this is significant increase. And when it comes to Pakistan, the similar increases are there. And if we see the global contribution of greenhouse gas emissions from Pakistan is less than 1%. In spite of this, we are one of the most vulnerable countries to the climate change. So we are concerned, because nitrogen pollution is a global issue. It's a transboundary issue. So we are concerned that we must work on this pollution importance. And just look on the N2O emissions, ammonia emissions, and NOx emissions. And you can see that all of different sectors are involved. Particularly, if you see the NOx, there are other sectors like energy, industry, fossil fuel, domestic. While N2O emissions and ammonia emissions, mostly agriculture sector is involved in the South Asia. Though, if we see the global sustainable development goals and the targets and indicators, there is no nitrogen, it's not visible. So we planned to make nitrogen visible to these sustainable development goals through these targets. Because nitrogen pollution has already crossed planetary boundaries of the sustainability, so it impacts all of these goals. And ignoring nitrogen, it will limit our ability to deal with other planetary problems, like if we are using too less of nitrogen, there are certain sustainable development goals which cannot be achieved. And if there is more nitrogen in the system, there are other sustainable development goals which will be impaired. So there is a need for sustainable nitrogen management. So nitrogen for climate with multiple co-benefits, because when you action on both carbon and nitrogen, it is needed to reach net zero. Without nitrogen, there is no net zero. So having nitrogen waste globally offers about $300 billion per year innovation opportunity to stimulate green recovery. So this is an opportunity for nitro finance as well. So simultaneous benefits for climate, health, and the nature through cleaner air, water, and stratospheric ozone protection. So there are, as discussed earlier, there are 2 resolutions on sustainable nitrogen management, and I'm pleased that both of these resolutions were championed or tabled by the South Asian countries. So, and onward, there is also a Colombo Declaration and the coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, where Target 7, it is built on the Colombo Declaration to halve the nutrient pollution. So nations are also sensitive. And there are certain future challenges and emerging science and technological innovations as discussed in the previous lecture. So current governance strategies and approaches are fragmented and do not adequately address the global issue of nitrogen challenge. And most importantly, tripling of the nitrogen fertilizer prices in the recent years linked to global instability or some other reasons, they provide an economic threat to farmers, governments, and the public. And also it strengthens the motivation to reduce nitrogen emissions and nitrogen waste. And also the emerging development of utilizing ammonia as a nitrogen-based fuel as part of the global decarbonization activities. It has also a potential to more than quadruple the global anthropogenic flows of reactive nitrogen. On the same side, there may be major reasons or major new sources for ammonia emissions, and expected the competition between the fertilizer industry as well as this fuel industry. So there was discussion, is there a need for a 3rd resolution? Yes, because every subsequent UNEA resolution takes the work forward, extending the consensus and agreement on shared actions like the plastic pollution resolutions, starting from UNEA-1 to UNEA-5. So each new resolution thus sets the agenda for the years ahead, also keeping the topic in the public eye. And with national action plans now being developed, there is opportunity for member states to crystallize the lessons learned in setting priorities for sharing and mutual support in the years ahead. And there are only 6 years for 2030. So there is a need for the member states to consider to share information on their actions to reduce nitrogen waste by 2030, including share information on their nitrogen policies if we have to deliver the coming Montreal Target 7 as well. To coordinate in harmonization of approaches for reporting of the sustainable nitrogen action plans with the aim of promoting comparability and lessons sharing among the nations, and to develop draft terms of references for an intergovernmental nitrogen coordination or cooperation mechanism that promote cooperation between the member states, conventions, and other multilateral agreements relevant for sustainable nitrogen management. And lastly, to engage with relevant development partners to characterize the concept of nitrofinance as an emerging part of green finance taxonomies as a basis to mobilize investment in reducing nitrogen waste and promote circularity. Because while preparing for the national action plans and also to implement the national action plans, finances are required. And for most of the developing countries, we need the capacity building as well as these sharing of the technologies as well as the finances. So thank you very much for this. Now I would request Dr. Mihai Constantinisu, co-chair of the United Nations Environment Program Working Group on Nitrogen, please discuss.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear in-person and online participants, good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. I would like to start by congratulating Pakistan for the event. I know it is hard work behind, and I know that Pakistan is committed to further work on the nitrogen topic. It's coming very hard for me after two scientists who had graphs, maps, and different artifacts presented on the screen. I will be a bit more administrative with my presentation. But anyway, it is my pleasure to present you the hard work that we have done together with almost 90 member states and with the support of the UNEP Secretariat during last year. As you may know, we had from January to January like 4 meetings. And I believe that we had a good progress. And also, it is my duty here, beyond the report that is presented on the website, to show what is the remaining work and how we can, what are the options to go forward. We are now having almost 90 countries, or around 90 countries with designated focal points, but we go with the ambition of having 100 member states at least. We developed a voluntary national action plan template built upon the experience of the member states as we analyze data from quite a lot of countries and information of what is implemented at the level of the member states. And I can tell you that the most encouraging fact is that we notice real interest raised in the preparation and implementation of the national action plans. As I mentioned, I will go now through what we have done and what we missed in the last year. So we had to prepare a roadmap for the implementation of the resolution 414 and 5/2 on sustainable nitrogen management. We had it, we worked, I remember in April, we presented at the Bucharest meeting, but that roadmap was just going up to UNEA-6. We haven't seen beyond, we haven't put anything yet on the paper for what's happening beyond 2024. Despite the fact that in resolution 5/2 we have two provisions mentioning 2030. Yes, on the relevant task, I believe we went on the relevant task. So one of the strongest provision in the resolution is to provide technical and policy recommendations to accelerate actions to significantly reduce nitrogen waste globally by 2030 and beyond. And this is why I'm saying that despite not being at that level of ambitions, halving the nitrogen waste in the resolution, we still have this, and we still have the perspective based on the resolutions to continue the work towards 2030 and beyond. But now looking back to what we have done as a working group, we work at the National Action Plan, coming with different provisions that may fit depending on the local necessities, but still we haven't foreseen any implementation calendar, we haven't foreseen any indicators and monitoring and evaluation, and this is something that we can tackle in the next period. And this being said, already discussions are initiated with different multilateral environmental agreements, because it seems that we are having the same challenges and we should work on harmonizing the indicators. When sharing information on voluntary national action plans, we already did right from the beginning. In January last year, we started asking member states to provide us with information on what is implemented at the level of the member states, but this is an ongoing process. We do have a lot to work on modalities for the options for improved coordination across the global nitrogen cycle, and especially when it comes to intergovernmental coordination mechanism. Well, we have to admit and acknowledge that working group was one of the strongest forum for coordination, for ensuring coordination. We have GPNM, we also always had it from the beginning with us. We initiated discussions through Nexus Dialogue, and as participants, we've been through INI, TFRN, FAO, UNICEF research projects with different components on policy and knowledge sharing. But it still remained for the next period to further militate for integrating nitrogen in various multilateral environmental agreements and to work together towards sustainable nitrogen management, especially on indicators and not only. So to conclude, what should be the highest ambitions that we may have at the level of the working group is to prepare and implement as well a nitrogen roadmap for 2040 and 2030 and 2024-2030. And this, it will mean as well to align our actions with the SDGs. This roadmap should include further work on the National Action Plan templates, consolidating the National Action Plan templates with monitoring and evaluation framework, including indicators with relevance on reducing nitrogen waste, and with a view at the 2030 target date for the SDGs. But in doing this, we must be careful in harmonizing and finding and developing together with other multilateral environmental agreements, harmonized mechanism for indicators and reporting, not to duplicate especially. This roadmap should include as well continuing the collaborative relation of the working group with the GPNM and wastewater initiative. I think it's a lot to work, and especially with the wastewater initiative. It's something that we missed last year, but we have plenty of time in the future. Strengthening the role of the member states in the GPNM maybe as well is something that we'll be interested in, and as well to look deeper on eutrophication, considering as well the monitoring actions on this phenomenon. This roadmap should include as well special meetings with various multilateral environmental agreements representatives for strengthening the collaboration towards achieving changes and integrated nitrogen in all relevant NEEs. We should acknowledge that nitrous oxide control is not addressed by the Montreal Protocol, that we should encourage further efforts to reduce air pollution under the Gothenburg Protocol. And this being said, it is an agreement for the Gothenburg Protocol to be reviewed and revised, and as well to work on implementing Target 7 of the Kunming Global Biodiversity Framework together with the representative of the Global Biodiversity Framework. This roadmap should as well include offering guidance and consultancy services to countries that are willing to initiate actions. And so far we are having at least 10 countries asking support from UNEP in this direction. And it means as well to stay closer to country-specific needs. Sometimes a global map, it doesn't reflect the specificities from a certain region, a certain countries. And I know from the representatives of the member states that having their specificities included in the national action plans is what they want. We should have an expert panel, actually a scientific technical support team as well for the working group. And we should work towards this. The working group is the result, and I hereby acknowledge this, is the result of the scientific community. While we use the GPNM as the main platform to include scientific representatives at our meetings, I believe it's more appropriate to have a scientific technical support team along all the meetings of our working group. And I would like to end my speech by saying that funds are essential. And I know that UNEP Secretariat is doing quite a lot of efforts for fundraising. Will not be able to have experts close to the working group, and will not be able to have support meetings, further meetings, and support for countries asking support for the preparation of the national action plans without extra funds. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mihai. I would request all of my distinguished guests on the stage to please come on the audience side. And now we are going to have some short panel discussion. Professor Mark Sutton will moderate this, and I would request David Cooper from Acting Executive Secretary, Convention of Biodiversity, Ms. Erini Petstredi from Compassion Involved Farming, and Ms. Bigyapti Nepal from South Asia Nitrogen Hub. And after this discussion, there will be a short question and answer session. Professor Mark will be moderating. Dr. Mark, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you very much. Let's put that mic off. We'll avoid our feedback. So it's a pleasure to have this next step of the panelists here. We're going to give them just 2 or 3 minutes to make their pitch as to, and partly in response to what you've heard this evening. Secretary of the Convention on Biological Diversity. And David, we've heard that mentioned several times already, so I'm sure you're going to give us a pitch for it. But what are your reflections, and bring us to order?
Thanks, Em. And yeah, I mean, I think it was made clear this is an ambitious target that we have in Target 7 to half the loss of nutrients to the environment. And indeed, in fact, if I reflect on those last moments in Montreal at COP15, this target and a related one on subsidies, Target 18, were 2 of the last things to be agreed in bilateral negotiations with a number of parties, and that recognizes that they're ambitious targets. And in fact, the target as a whole perhaps is even more ambitious, as you sort of alluded to. The first part of this target, to reduce the level of the level of pollution to levels that are not harmful to biodiversity, is actually extremely ambitious. So halving nutrient waste is just one step to doing that. And that really reinforces, yes, this is going to be challenging, but it's necessary, right? It's necessary if we're to meet the objectives of the convention and of the Kunming-Montreal framework of reversing the loss of biodiversity. But also equally, as you say, it's full of opportunities. We are wasting these billions of dollars worth of nitrogen on farms, as well as the additional opportunities for recycling of other waste as well. And I think let's also look at some other aspects of the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework which are synergistic with this one. So one is Target 18 on the reduction of perverse subsidies or repurposing of subsidies. We're currently spending a lot more to destroy biodiversity than we are investing to protect it, and that includes subsidies on fertilizers. At the same time, let's recognize that some of the income that farmers and others get from those subsidies is necessary. We're not going to simply scrap the support to farmers, but that is needed. Looking at other targets, we have Target 16, which is also about reducing waste, including food waste. There's another important part of the equation, and reducing overconsumption. And we know that we're not able to square the circle between everyone having enough and staying in with it planetary boundaries if we don't have a more equitable distribution of benefits and of consumption. And another important target is target 10 on sustainable agricultural practices, moving to relying more on biodiversity, making use of biodiversity on farm, for pest control, but also in terms of nutrient cycling and managing nutrients in the soil. And indeed, if we look around the world, we do see positive cases of where working with farmers, it is possible to have massive improvements in the efficiency of use of nitrogen. And just two examples. One, perhaps the zero budget natural farming approach in India. Another an experiment that was done in China involving 20 million farmers. Hundreds of thousands of extension agents, including actually from the private sector, from the fertilizer companies, and thousands of researchers, where with simple support to farmers, this was nothing complicated, they could simultaneously increase yields by 11-12% and decrease nitrogen use by 15% at the same time. So multiply those well on the way to the sort of targets that we need to do. So these things can be done. We look to the support of this working group in terms of this roadmap, supporting countries with their national plans, national action plans, which can be then linked to the national biodiversity strategies and action plans, as well as to the NDC process and the climate convention and the like. We'll need to work together more on indicators. And certainly that will be important in monitoring progress going forward. I think I've spoken for too long, so I'll stop.
It was really helpful, David, and I think we're all going to want to ask you 20 more questions. But just for remembering, before we go to the next panelist here, we do have a reception after this event, and the reception was originally billed as being in the recreation centre. It's now going to happen here. So out the back door there, straight to where the food is after the panelists have finished speaking, but that's where you're going to be able to bug David and the other speakers earlier for further details. But I'm going to go on now to Irini Pitsilidi from Compassion in World Farming. Give us your take, Irini.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Mark. And I want to thank also all the distinguished panel of speakers who offered and will offer at the reception their perspectives on this evening. The breadth of perspectives we heard already really show that nitrogen impacts everyone and has an impact everywhere. As Mark said, I'm Irini Pitsilidi. I'm the Global Head of International Affairs at Compassion in World Farming. And for those of you who don't know CIWF, I'll just take one moment to tell you that we are a farmer-founded NGO focusing on animal agriculture and its impacts on the environment and animals. We work across the UN system to create a more sustainable, healthier and higher welfare existence for everyone on the planet. Now, as a team, we operate on the science policy nexus, and we know that animal agriculture can actually be part of the solution in tackling the triple planetary crisis. And we're very proud to partner with member states, governments, academia, international organizations in order to achieve this. Among the issues we follow quite closely, as you may have imagined, because we're here, is nitrogen waste and pollution. And you may wonder why, but really the answer is very simple. As an organization that focuses on animal agriculture, firstly, I think we know in this room that vast amounts of the world's croplands are used to feed animals, raised mostly in industrial systems. In the US, for example, we know that more than 90% of soybean crop is fed to food-producing animals. For these feed crops, among other chemicals, obviously, synthetic nitrogen fertilizers are necessary. However, we know that globally, 70 to 80% of synthetic nitrogen fertilizers are lost to air, run from agricultural fields to natural ecosystems, or are otherwise wasted. it's clear that we're talking about a lot of nitrogen waste with all the environmental, health, and basically financial implications this has. But secondly, at another level, industrial animal agriculture comes with its own set of nitrogen-related problems in the farm. Some examples are manure management issues, ammonia, particle concentration, particle pollution, to name just few examples. Now, we know that transforming agri-food systems, and by that, I don't just mean how we produce things, but how we raise animals, what we eat, how much of it we eat. They all can make animal agriculture part of the solution rather than a problematic kind of sector. At present, and as all we saw in much of the technical presentations, which were a masterclass really on nitrogen, at present the issue seems to be focusing on agriculture. But as we have been engaging more and more in this space, we're seeing the increasing interest in green ammonia or hydrogen, which we know could triple or quadruple nitrogen use worldwide. So one thing is very clear, that we need to get nitrogen right. And we know urgent action is needed. But in reality, we need both immediate tangible changes and also longer term transformational changes that include both the obvious, but also the less obvious. That is indirect changes such as behavioral shifts related to our diets, especially in areas of the world where we know we overconsume animal protein, but also addressing issues like the number of animals we have in the global food system. We must embrace technology and innovation, but we must also remember that traditional and indigenous knowledge and notions such as agroecology or regenerative agriculture were the original innovation, but still holds a lot of relevance today and deserves to be protected and scaled up. Conceptually, in the work we do as international affairs team, conceptually we know nitrogen waste is quite complicated. And while the people in this room might understand it very well, we know policymakers elsewhere may not understand it that well. So we want to partner with member states, academics, other stakeholders to best advance sustainable nitrogen management in various policy instruments across the UN. We very much see it as our responsibility to not only make nitrogen visible in multilateral policy work, but to also raise global ambition to better manage it and meet internationally agreed targets, such as Target 7 of the Global Biodiversity Framework. Now, we commend the governments here tonight because you have been vanguards on nitrogen, and we certainly welcome a broader and more ambitious coalition of countries looking to coordinate and accelerate action in tackling this issue. I'll just close by saying that the responsibility to sustainably manage nitrogen does not fall solely on governments. It's not just governments, not just farmers or academia or even civil society. It requires a whole of society approach through multi-stakeholder engagement. So as you leave here and think about your role in this solution and you go towards the amazing reception across the room, please consider getting in touch with us. We stand ready to support. We stand ready to happy to work with anyone to make nitrogen visible and pass to the next generations a healthier, more sustainable, and higher welfare planet for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Irene. So we're going to pass over now to Bigyati Nepal, who's one of the group of early career researchers supported by the South Asia Nitrogen Hub and INMS.
Thank you, Professor Mark, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for your time being here, listening about nitrogen. As a young environmental scientist for nitrogen sustainability, closely working with farmers and rural communities in South Asia, we witnessed the consequences of unchecked fertilizer use in agriculture. It is not just the chemistry of nitrogen. Nitrogen pollution also directly negatively impacts the livelihoods of health of farmers, farm workers, and their communities. In our fieldworks, we work alongside and in partnership with farming communities, benefiting directly from their wisdom and expertise. An anecdote of note in this moment is farmers on the same land as their forefathers, reporting little to no use of fertilizer in the past, and today they are entrapped in an increasingly costly cycle of fertilizer input needs, resulting in a costly positive feedback loop. This can be seen in consumption of fertilizer increasing by 5-fold since 1990. In many developing countries, rural women depend on agriculture for their livelihoods, with 57 to 74% of farm workers in South Asia being women. For example, in my home country of Nepal, mostly women are hired for fertilizer application. Without nitrogenous fertilizer, around 80% women would be without income. However, the same nitrogen can cause leaching and pollute their water resources, and this can cause the blue baby syndrome in infants. So farmers and women using fertilizers have been failed in their relationship with government and scientific communities, as the transfer of information and the support of existing mechanisms are wholly insufficient to increase nitrogen use efficiency and decrease nitrogen waste. Scientific knowledge needs to reach to grassroots levels through training, awareness, active field presence, continuous monitoring, and community engagement. And as everybody is saying that, we need multiple stakeholder collaboration to contribute to achieving sustainable development goals through nitrogen management. And all this platform, we demand for collective action against immediate threats posed by nitrogen pollution and for the right future of generations to clean air and water and food. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bigapti, for that. I realize that's a joint statement on behalf of you. You've worked on together, and I think a really clear message emphasizing the urgency of addressing the nitrogen challenge, real lives there. We are massively over time, apparently, and that means that you probably have questions, but we want to encourage you to take your questions during the reception. So have that question to hand. Do not forget it. Bring it to one of the speakers or one of the organizers. Don't let us go away without addressing your questions. For those of you online, there may be that you can stick a chat comment in or somewhere, or send an email to the South Asian Nitrogen Hub office, and let us hear your views while they're fresh in your mind. So with that, and remember the food is just out there, I'm going to pass over now to His Excellency High Commissioner Ibra Hussain Khan to close the event. High Commissioner.
Thank you so very much. Good evening. I'm in the most unenviable position, between you and your food. So, and I don't have a prepared speech. So please forgive me my inconsistency or incoherence or downright nonsensicalness. Mark, if you were to deliver your presentation in the Scottish dialect, I would have, been completely lost. I just came over from the UK. I spent there 4 years. And whenever I would go to Scotland, I would not get a single word from anybody. So I would warn them, please, be very slow and, very clear. But then, Scotland, as you know, is the most innovative nation on earth. In per capita, the most innovations have come from Scotland. It would be naive of me if I, start lecturing you on nitrogen, a room full of experts and, such erudite people. But, we humans, since our birth, we have been faced with 3 challenges: famine and hunger, pestilence and disease, and violence. Now it is in the scheme of things that while we conquered famine and hunger, but we now die of overeating.
Now we drive our cars to our gyms to lose calories. Similar is the case with disease, and the same is with violence. But, humans, it has always been a collaborative, work. Newton would have been impossible without Galileo or Tycho Brahe or Kepler and Leibniz. And similarly, Einstein would have been impossible without, other humans playing their role. And we are under the umbrella of the UN. So it's a collaborative work. We have reached the right conclusion that whatever we do, and if we want to have a bright future and a secure future, then we have to do it together, because we all are in it together. It can't happen that a person in the UK would make himself immune to the depredations of the climate change. Because if somebody is suffering in Bangladesh or Netherlands, that same person in the UK cannot feel secure, and he will not be secure. Now, the problem that we have been discussing here today is nitrogen, and we all are, we all agree that it is invisible in the discourse, in the debate, and it needs to be securitized, and it needs to be brought to the discourse. That is one thing. The second thing is how to resolve this issue. Because when we wanted to defeat hunger, in that endeavor, we started overproducing and started overusing our resources. We need 2.5 planets for our current consumption. So we need to make it visible, but then how do we go forward? How do we move forward? And since we are under the umbrella of the UN, so we can only move forward together. No country on earth can do it alone, because it is cross-cutting and it affects everybody. But then, we have best practices. For example, if I'm a nascent country, and if I'm a new country and I want to establish a hospital or hospitals in my country, there are best practices available. I can go to Scotland, I can go to Germany, I can go to Australia and learn from them. So we have to learn from each other, number one. And then number two, we have to help each other. And that help can come in 2 different ways. One is the expertise, the skill that you can transfer to your human brethren. And the other is finance, that is of utmost importance. Because while you may lecture, the have-nots of the world on all the disadvantages of nitrogen, but if they are simply incapable of financing that solution, they're not going to do it, because their first and foremost instinct is survival. And for survival, they need food. So, and survival is instant. It's immediate. So a person living in a poor country, in a poor society with very meager resources, even if he or she knows about the problem, but he or she does not have the wherewithal to resolve it. So we have to, do it together. We have to securitize it. We have to, help each other. And we have to help each other through transfer of skills, transfer of technology, and finance as well. In the end, I would like to thank all the speakers. They were eloquent, they were articulate, and I stand educated today a lot. And all the panelists, you were amazing in explaining the problem and the issue. and all those, Mr. Tariq Aziz, and I don't remember because there were, the organizations, the NGOs and all those who came together to put together such a fantastic event. I'm really grateful for that, and I don't want to be, to stop you from having your dinner anymore. Thank you so much. Thank you, and a very good night.
In the end, you are all welcome to this reception. And adding some comments, some thanks. I'm very much thankful to Compassion in World Farming for co-organizing this event and also offering this wonderful reception. And I'm thankful for INI, INMS, SANH, UNEP, Nitrogen Working Group, the government of Japan, particularly the government of Maldives. Thank you very much, all of the delegates for joining us. Thank you very much.